Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of Smarter Podcasting. So I have two special offers that I'm doing right now for just two people. The first one is the Podcast Launch Lab, and that's how you can get your podcast started in just 14 days. So the first one is the Podcast Launch Lab, and within 14 days, we can get you and your podcast started. We'll start off on day one with a deep dive strategy session with me. You'll get unlimited messaging support throughout this time as well. We'll do a momentum check-in call after 8 days. And then on day 14, we're going to prep your podcast and launch it. During this time, you will get a podcast planning checklist, an episode format template, a content calendar template, a growth tracking sheet, and a submission guide to make sure that you're on Apple and Spotify and all of those places as well. And to top it all off, after 90 days, you're going to get a follow-up call with me to see how it's going, making sure that all your systems are still working and where you should go next. So in just 14 days, you're going to walk away with 2 hours with me. You're going to have a clear, focused podcast concept that you're proud of. You're going to have all your gear sorted so you're not wasting time Googling or buying things that don't work. You'll have your show format, your intro, your outro, and all your trailers ready to go. You should have your first 3 episodes in progress or recorded and a plan to launch on all platforms so that you can launch with confidence. So if you are interested in this, just go to my website, 7millionbikes.com/podcast-launch-lab. If you can't remember that, you can get it in the show notes. The second offer is for those of you who may be listening to this that already have a podcast, and that's called the Podcast Makeover. In 14 days, we're going to give your existing podcast a makeover to make it sound amazing. So day one's going to start with a kickoff call with me, just 30 minutes. So we'll discuss your goals, your pain points, your workflow, and your tech setup. We'll do a quick pulse check, see how everything's going and how your overall podcast presents itself. Then I'm going to do an audit of your existing podcast. And on day 4, I'm going to give you the feedback from that audit. Meaning then on day 7, I'm going to follow up with you to see if you've started to make these changes and make sure you refine them before you publish your next episode. Then on day 14, we're going to do a final evaluation. So we'll review your latest episode, see what's improved, and lock in what to keep doing and maybe what to stop. And we'll not just finish there. On day 90, we're going to have a follow-up call to make sure that you've kept on track, you kept that momentum up. We'll celebrate the wins and we'll plan the next 90 days. In the podcast makeover, you're going to walk away with a fix-it checklist, an audio editing quick wins list, branding and clarity tips, and growth levers tailored just for you. And just like in the last one as well, you get unlimited messaging to me for 14 days. You can just imagine that I'm in your pocket at all time and you can ask me anything you want. If this is for you, then just go to 7millionbikes.com/podcast-makeover. And again, you can just go to the show notes, or if you just want to get in touch with me, it's neil@7millionbikes.com, or go to any of our social medias and send me a message, and I can help your podcast sound like a pro, or I can help you get your podcast started in the next 14 days. All right, let's get to the episode. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. I love as well how you mentioned some people, it can take so much time, but for you, you can schedule a month's worth of podcasts in a couple of hours. But on the flip side, we can also do things really quickly. And I want to use this podcast that we're making right now as an example. It is 3:30 Vietnamese time. As soon as we finish this, we're going to edit it and we're going to aim to get this out by 7 p.m. Vietnamese time, so within 3.5 hours. Welcome back to another episode with me, your host, Neil Mackay, the podcast guy. I'm the founder of 7 Million Bikes Podcasts and the host of a Vietnam podcast and this show, Smarter Podcasting. I started a Vietnam podcast back in 2019 just as a hobby, and it has now gone on to be one of the top 5% of podcasts in the world. Award-winning as well, and because of that, and because I lost my job during COVID, I started 7 Million Bikes Podcasts, and we now work with over 70 podcasts around the world to help them start, launch, and grow their show. We've helped with thousands of episodes, millions of downloads, and help podcasts like the one we're going to be talking to today get to the top of the podcast charts. In Smarter Podcasting, our goal is to help you make the best podcast possible, whether that's for yourself or your business. We like to think of ourselves as experts at helping businesses create niche podcasts that connect with their customers and build their brand. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm talking today to a podcaster that we started working with in January 2024. Now it is 2025. Now it's incredible to see any podcast get past the dreaded pod fade, which is just 10 episodes. And we are now nearly 18 months into this podcast. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about why you should start a podcast and how much of a difference it can make to your business, and how working with 7 Million Bikes podcast can help you do that. Now, my guest today, he's not only the host and creator of the Mindful Creative podcast. It was called Creativity for Sale. He's also the executive creative director at Brand New Studio. He is the author of 6 books. He has also done a TED Talk and spoke at the OFF conference last year to 5,000 people in Barcelona, and just did another stint there running workshops. My guest today, I'm really excited to share his story, is Radim Malinic. Radim, thank you so much for coming on Smarter Podcasting.
Oh, thanks for having me again. It's always a pleasure to talk about, the proper side of podcasting, because I think, as you said, we've started in January 2024. And now it's May 25. I don't know how many literally there's 100 and something episodes, 140 episodes we did. And it's been, I'm beginning to feel like this is one of the most rewarding things I've ever done for myself, for my business, because as much people believe that a podcast is about them, actually is about other people. It's like how you lift them up and actually what you do for that. So you've been an integral part of this journey, and I'm excited because we are not stopping anytime soon.
I absolutely love that. And you can see the Cheshire grin on my face, because I'll absolutely love to hear that. And it's why I do what I do. And this podcast has come about because obviously we talk online, WhatsApp, almost every day in a group chat with our senior editor. And you mentioned to me something that as soon as you told me, I was like, we need to talk about this on a podcast. So tell me a bit about what was that conversation?
I think there's a misconception about how much work podcast can be. To some people, podcasting seems like a full-time job, because from the outside, like they don't necessarily know what it entails. And in my opinion, I wanted to start a podcast maybe even a year sooner than you, in 2018, because I like the idea of having a podcast. But I wasn't ready. I mean, I wouldn't have produced this number of episodes or used this so much sort of easiness and flair back then. I think for me it happened at the right time, and for me podcast was an extension of my sort of written work, of my books. So the reason why we've had podcasts with 2 different season names already is because I've got 2 books, and we are just about to sort of change it to the title of my next book, my 7th book. But you know what? Why not? Let's do it. Like, let's give it a theme. And actually this time I'm going to be writing a book almost live through the guest conversations, through bonus episodes. As opposed to saying like, ta-da, here's the book and here's the and let's start a podcast series. And it's like, I'm doing it ahead. And I think it's not passion, my obsession about podcasting now, because I wouldn't say I'm passionate, but I'm obsessive about what it does and what it can be, because it plays on my senses, is that whenever I have conversations with budding authors or friends or people who are already podcasting, I'm curious about their workflow. Like, how do you do this? How do you think? Because when people say podcast is a lot of work, I'm like, it's quite a bit of work to set it up, but once you get it moving, then you're fine. Like this is when I spoke to you, because you got recommended to us by a mutual friend, and as soon as you sort of volunteered so much information in the beginning of like how not to make the initial mistakes, I was like, how can we even simplify this? Like, how can I get my booking system faster? How can I get my processing faster? Like, how I can make sure that it works in my group of companies? Like, how I can actually achieve this? Because in my intro, you could have mentioned also that I've got a coffee company, and it's just like, when I talk to people, they're like, when do you sleep? What do you do? And I said, like, look, listen, I only work 4 hours a day. I've got 4 different businesses. I only work 4 hours a day because I'm also dad, and I've spent time with my kids, and I don't want them to, say like, oh, dad's been editing podcasts till midnight. Like, dad wasn't editing podcasts because dad's smart, and he's got someone called, 7 Million Bikes podcast to help him. So I have actually, in terms of a business growth, this podcast has been absolutely imperative tool, because I now go and have a conversation, and what I pull up my chair, the big boys table, and I'm not there sort of trying to trump some of the design legends at their own game. I'm there as someone who's about to ask them lots of questions, like how to get him on a podcast, like come and talk to me about the things you haven't had a chance to speak to, because there's a lot of templated questions, there's a lot of templated format. And as you know, from our last conversation, I don't have any questions. I just get someone on a podcast and like, I know very little about you, but I've got an hour to ask you all the questions that people would love to ask you. So that works. So when I talk about a podcasting, I talk about how it works, I'm very much of the nature of like, it can be easy, it can really work. And I've been setting up podcasts for my clients now, like, because they see the zest, the joy and happiness of like, hey, it's not what you think, and that makes a difference.
There's so many things to bounce off of there. One of them is you're saying about how it doesn't need to take you that much time. At the end of the day, it does take 8 to 10 hours to make one episode of a podcast. But the reason that we work with businesses and people like yourself is because we can do that time. We can take that time and use our expertise. The other thing I love as well, you talked about the information I give in the beginning. And it's interesting you brought that up because I just had a client meeting last week and it was meant to be a 15-minute call. And it turned into an hour-long call. And I basically just downloaded so much information that I know because I love talking about this stuff and I love sharing it. That client hasn't come back to me yet. So part of me now is like, did I give too much information? Do I give too much away? But it's just naturally in my personality and it's the feedback that I've had. And when we work with people long-term like you, I think that makes the most benefit. So maybe I've lost this client. Maybe I told him too much. But at the end of the day, that's just who I am. And I love sharing that information. So if they have taken advantage of me, which is maybe a possibility, and I gave away a free call and they spent an hour taking all my information that I shared with them and then they're going to run with it. What can I do if they've done that at the end of the day? But I love sharing that knowledge and I love that it's just really interesting hearing someone like yourself talk about something that would have happened nearly 18 months ago, but it obviously sticks with you. And that's what we do at 7 Million Bikes Podcast. We want to make things personal. I want to share that knowledge. I want to help you above and beyond what would be normal. And that's what, I guess, going back to what I want to talk to you about. I remember you said you went to a big conference and you were talking to lots of people about podcasts and who had their own podcast as well. And one of the big barriers, one of the big pain points was their workflow and how difficult it was. And this is one of the things that we try and do well at 7 Million Bikes Podcast is make that easy for people. So I'm really interested to hear from you. What were those barriers? What were those pain points that you were hearing from people?
It's an interesting question because I'm obsessive about my workflow working for me. And then I speak to other people and they're like, hey, I would love to have you on my show. Well, their assistant, this conference happened 6 weeks ago. This conference happened 6 weeks ago and their assistant hasn't still sent me their booking link. They still hasn't sent me the link. Whereas I saw the very same person just on Saturday. I said, hey, I need you on my show. Here's the link. Here's the WhatsApp. Book it. Look, I've got automated thing coming up on my Slack telling me that you just booked it. This happened in 20 seconds. I feel, especially like now, trying to chase guests of a higher stature, of a bigger, more of a sort of prestige and respect, they are harder to pin down. They are harder to get them down. So at the beginning, it was quite easy to send a link to a friend and they booked it for tomorrow. And we're like, okay, we've got a guest tomorrow. Whereas in the way of growing my podcast, I want to make sure that I catch people in the first hit. Like, yeah, you come in, here's the link, book it, because we don't have to have another conversation until we speak on the show. So having a Calendly integrated with a Riverside link, straight sort of come in via my Slack into my iCloud calendar, like that's the first thing that, it's the first pain point sorted. I don't offer variable times. I don't offer 9:15, 9:30, 9:45. No. It's either 10 o'clock in the morning in UK time or 9 o'clock in the evening. Reasons? My kids are here in school, or my kids are asleep. That's how we can do it. Both of those slots cover Australia, America quite easily. Like I never had any, but one guest asked for an earlier slot because they were sort of in between flights. But everyone can make it. This is the good bit about podcasting. People love talking about themselves. They will make the time. Like you make it next week, next month, you're going to come at 10 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the evening. Like I felt that I had to be like everything to everyone. I don't have to be. And I really proved that to myself. So sort of having set times, I know what I'm doing when, therefore I can actually be more concentrated on my time blocking, like when I'm doing what. So obviously then, as I said, I've got Riverside link because the Riverside doesn't change the studio link. So that's easy. I've started using Riverside for my client calls. So I've got another calendar just at 1:00 for the new clients and new conversations. 1:00 in the afternoon. Again, I know I'll be around. I'll be in between calls or in between work. And I'm using another Riverside studio link for those calls. So no need for Zoom. And then obviously that conversation gets taken up, whatever gets recorded, that conversation goes to you guys. Obviously you prepare it on the script, obviously you clean it all up. The number of compliments I had from people like, this is insanely well produced. Because as you and I know from our conversations, like it's almost inexcusable to have a bad quality. I nearly swore, but like it's inexcusable to have bad quality in 2025. You know, I remember listening to podcasts in 2005 and they were echoing around the room. I'm like, okay, this is excusable. But now it really separates it because like some people try to do things themselves. They might have a nice intro, but then the conversation starts bouncing around the room. And I'm just eternally obsessive about the quality of my audio. I want this to be as crisp and as clear as possible because I'm not going to be obsessing about every single word in a conversation, but I want that conversation to sound crisp and clear. So if someone actually spends the time with us, then we want to give them the best experience. Otherwise, you know, you really need to, you know, interview Dalai Lama so people can actually suffer through your interview to sit through a really bad audio.
This makes me feel the proudest because one of our core values. So about 6 months ago, we sat down with the team and we said, what are our core values? So it was quality was number one, then creativity, then making a difference. So all the podcasts we do, we want to make sure they're quality, they're creative, and they make a difference. And creative can just be something small, like moving the audio a tiny bit so people aren't talking over each other, right? It doesn't mean creative, like we have to be like, wow, and make this brand new thing. So, but number one is quality. And you just brought it up there. We pride ourselves on that, and there is no excuse in 2025. We will do everything we can to try and make the podcast sound as good as possible. And you know fine well how bad the audio can sound sometimes. We still, and it's never, not never, but nearly never the host's fault. It's normally always the guest. I've had it happen to me, the guest. The worst thing is using the laptop microphone they set up in a noisy room. I've had people sweeping in the background. I'm like, is somebody sweeping? Can you stop? I've had fans on in the side where you can just hear the, like, can you turn the fan off, please? So we really focus on that. So the fact that you've had feedback on that just makes me so happy because even just like you mentioned that I listen to really, really professional podcasts by big name brands. And I'm not talking about like studio produced podcasts that are made in LA, if you know the company I'm talking about, and they make wonderful podcasts, but big name podcasts that are interview based, maybe made quite quickly. So they come out that night or the next day, but still I hear mouth noises, I hear breaths, I hear things that I'm like, I think for a professional podcast, I could cut this out and I could make this better. And you won't actually believe this. I actually did this just last week to a podcaster, a journalist from New Zealand that I really love and respect. I don't want to say his name or anything like that, but he's fantastic. And I listened to one of his podcasts because I get his email newsletter. I'm subscribed. I pay to be on his newsletter because I really love what he does. And I actually, for the first time ever, went and found his podcast, like found how to download it, like, which is not natural. Like you can't go on Spotify and just download it onto your computer, but you can find every podcast because it's an MP3 file and download it. So I downloaded it and it had mouth sounds, it had breaths, it had just kind of poor audio quality. And I fixed it all. And I kind of did a hook on his podcast and fixed the overall sound. And I actually sent it to him. I mean, let's be honest, I was fishing for work, obviously, but because I do really respect this journalist as well. And I said, hey, I noticed these things in your podcast. I've fixed them. Here you are. Would you be interested in working together? And I actually wasn't even pitching him for money because I said I would do it for free if you gave us a shout out or whatnot, because he's a well-known journalist. Well, in my world, he's well-known anyway. He got back to me, which was amazing. Like, I was just happy he listened to it and he's like, hey, I love this. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you put the time into this. This podcast I'm doing actually doesn't require that level of service because sometimes I just record it and put it out a few minutes later. So that's fine. Like, not everyone wants to make a podcast that needs to go to an editor and then come back. But the fact that he just listened to it was great. But those are the kind of things that we listen for, that we look out for, that we generally can make better for a podcast.
I've been podcasting for years, and the number one tool that helped me become an award-winning podcast producer is the script. No matter whether you're a tech wizard or a beginner like me, the script can help you with everything you need to start your own podcast. If you want to start your own podcast today, download the script. The link is in the show notes. It's my number one recommendation to help you create a podcast easily, smoothly, and it has heaps of AI features that make your podcasting even better. So check it out. Let me know what you think. Let's get back to the episode.
I mean, yeah, some of the guests in 2025 showing up in a really echoey room with just their laptop thinking, that's okay. But what amazes me sometimes when I just, when I have those guests and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is not the quality I wanted. It comes out good. I don't know what you do, but it comes out good. Sometimes actually I'm surprised. Sometimes I feel like the people who show up with the Blue Yeti or whatever, sometimes they come up okay, whereas you can really polish the really bad sound to something that sounds believable. Yeah. So, yeah. And what's really interesting is often the people who are really keen to come on a podcast and they haven't even got a microphone. And I'm like, okay, the magic doesn't happen from a mic. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's just, I mean, and this is the balance, because you get the people you really want because you want a bigger conversation. They don't really grow crap, like, yeah, well, this is what I've got. I'm like, okay. I mean, I did nearly once recently pulled an episode because of a bad audio, but the conversation was good. And obviously what you guys did was good enough, actually surprisingly even better than I was expecting. But obviously, if we were to sort of measure it with a really strict stick, be like, yeah, that wasn't perfect. But the conversation was good and the guest was excited and the story resonated with a really new audience. So yeah, there's two advices I would give to people in 2025. Definitely get as best possible microphone as you can get. Use your phone as a camera, because that's easy because it's in your pocket.
What I'm doing right now, 4K.
Yeah, same here. And I guess the third advice would be know what you want to talk about. Like the meandering stories, like sometimes people got really interesting stories, but like, what is the word that you own? Like, what is the topic that you own? Like, what is the thing that you can sort of base the conversation around, and what you stand for and how you can sort of roll with it? Because some conversations I've recorded were just so effortless, so beautiful, because people really think day in, day out about their stuff. And then I've started telling people, like, don't tell me what you did in 92 or 96 or 26. Like, no one cares about that bit, because I'll still edit the times. Tell me about the things that'll surprise people. Tell me about the things that people can't see in your work or in your life. Like, tell me about that. But again, we all learn. I was a dreadful host at the beginning, because I wanted, like, this is my show, let's talk about me. And they're like, oh, no, wait a minute. You're here for other people.
There's two things there. One, just quickly talking about equipment. I actually had a guest recently who didn't own a pair of headphones. I was just like, wait, what? This is again 2025. You don't have headphones? I was like, okay. We made it work. It was fine. It was really bad audio because they used a microphone. Their laptop. But anyway, the other thing there is what, again, really important, what you've hit on there, and what we advise everybody is have a niche and have every episode focuses on one topic. So for my main show, a Vietnam podcast, the biggest thing I get, there's two things I get. One is, are you going to email me the questions beforehand? Which is a legitimate question, but I'm like, sorry, no, I don't do that. We just have a normal conversation. The podcast is about you and your story connected to Vietnam, because the podcast is about Vietnam. That's it, right? So it's quite easy in that sense. But then on the other spectrum, I get some people, and he won't be listening to this, but I still won't use his name, and he knows I make fun of him for it. He was like, oh, I could be on your podcast. I got some stories to share. I can't tell them though, all those stories to share I've got. And I was like, and it happened again recently, but in a different sense. He was talking about sexual stories. This guy was talking about other stories just recently, and he's like, oh, I could share all of this. And for both of them, I had to be like, that's not what the podcast is about. One, it's not about you coming on and airing your dirty laundry and having salacious stories. So that I'm like, oh, like, because some people think a podcast is just your vehicle to get on and talk about anything. And it's like, no, that's not what this podcast is about. And then the other guy, just not salacious stories, but I was just like, it's just not, we're going to talk about you and your connection to Vietnam, not this other thing, which was fine. That was fine. He was like, yeah, we're going to do that. So it is very important that you do have a niche. But going back to your workflow, so you've got the booking guests was difficult. What were the other pain points that people were having in terms of their workflow? Because this is something that I don't think about too much because I just do it the way I do it. But then I hear about other people having these troubles, and I'm like, oh, that's why we do it this way.
I mean, I've got a friend who's been podcasting for 9 years, and he still edits his podcast in GarageBand. Like that's what he does. But sometimes you just let people do what they do. I think that's the way to do it, because I love the fact that in the script I can just literally I don't even have to listen to the conversation. Sometimes I just take out the fillers, I can take out the sections of the conversation. I try to put myself as little as possible in these conversations now, because I've got a habit of sort of responding to conversation, painting the topic, and then asking the next question. So sometimes I just literally edit straight to the next question. I like that freedom that I can actually sort of go through it. More or less, that's after the booking and recording. That's my second hour of preparing. It's my second hour of preparing the episode, because obviously you guys have spent all your hours. Obviously, you guys have spent your hours on the edits. Obviously, I've saved myself that time. And yeah, then we obviously exported. I created a Buzzsprouts page because you showed me how to use Claude AI. I've got my custom prompt already set up, so I just change the name of the guest, upload the transcript, which is easy, So I just fine tune the title of the episode, do the basics, and then it takes me for the artwork. It takes me about 15 minutes to do. I use it in InDesign, so I've got automated. So I just relink the photo, literally use a find and replace the title, the number, the guest name. Done. Sometimes I use Adobe Firefly or Photoshop to actually improve people's pictures. Sometimes people send you a crop and you need different formats. So I've been, expanding photos in Photoshop, because again, sometimes you get one chance to get something out of someone. Sometimes you find something on the internet. You're like, oh my God, how we do this. But then it goes out. I do my intro in Grammarly. So I just combine the Claude summary with some of their bio. That's what we record, and I use that intro for my Mailchimp newsletter. So I've got about 7,500 people on my newsletter, and that gives me a reason to be in people's inboxes every Monday, or if I'm a bit late in the week. But I'm constantly there, and you get compliments. People say you show up, your work rate's good, and I'm like, if only everything in my life ever has been, about the 80-20, because it's very much 80% is, I believe, what you guys do, what you have to do and clean up. But yeah, it's for me, it's 20% effort, and it's just, it makes me happy, because I'm excited about this. It doesn't feel like work. It feels very easy. I mean, I sometimes say it's 2.5 hours for me to produce the episode, and it doesn't feel like a burden. And sometimes, if we are pre-recorded, I can literally load up a whole month of podcasts in 2 hours. So then we can actually focus on just publishing them out. And so when I say that to people who are podcasting with a lot less ease, they're like, oh my God, you need to come and show me how to do this. You need to show me how to do that. Or when I speak to clients, new clients, and they go like, are we thinking about doing a podcast? I'm like, let me tell you a few things. And obviously I come with a blizzard of information. They're like, yeah, can you do that for us? This is what we need, but we've got no idea where to start. And I think, having turned that into a monetization, it's been incredible, because I get, I don't make any sort of money from plays or from ads, because I'm using my own ads, but I've turned a lot of guests into various clients through my coffee business, through my book publishing business, through my consultancy business. It's the open window. It's kind of like an open door and open window to opportunities, because I used to, run strictly branding studio only, and you do the same work over and over again. Whereas this is opening not only conversation, but opportunities that didn't exist. And therefore that gives me unique sets of skills sitting at different tables now, where people have been doing the one thing over and over again for decades. And I go in there like, hey, look, I'm your age, but I've been doing a zillion different things, and I'm excited.
There's so many things sparking off right now that's just making me so happy. You've mentioned so many tools, some that we've introduced you to, like Claude.ai, and you mentioned you use Slack. I mean, we're similar. We use Calendly, Notion, Fill Out Form, WordPress. You can use all these systems and then just make and just make things so seamless. So that's really exciting as well. But the biggest thing you've said there that's really got me excited, again, we just share with people all the time, is that networking and that client outreach, and the fact that you're getting business from talking to people. We tell people this, it's not about having thousands of downloads. The real monetization doesn't really come from sponsorship, which only the top few % of podcasts in the world get. It's from selling your own services, and, you know, from you being able to create clients from that is really, really exciting. And I love as well how you mentioned some people, it can take so much time, but for you, you can schedule a month's worth of podcasts in a couple of hours. But I know, because we have a group chat, and that's something I love that 7 Million Bikes podcast does, is makes it personal. I've heard of some people in the past have hired editors, and it kind of goes off into the ether, then you get it back, and then it's not right, and then there's really a bit of a struggle going back and forth, whereas we just have these conversations that, hey, can you change this? Yep, we can change it as soon as we can. And Chelsea is amazing at just working all sorts of hours to get things done and making sure things are done as quickly as possible. But on the flip side, we can also do things really quickly. So we've had things where people come to us and like, can you get this out like tomorrow? And we'll do our best to do it. And I want to use this podcast that we're making right now as an example. It is 3:30 Vietnamese time. As soon as we finish this, we're going to edit it, and we're going to aim to get this out by 7 p.m. Vietnamese time. So within 3.5 hours. So we're going to go and do that right now. Radim, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for working with us. We can't thank you enough. It has been an absolute pleasure. And it's amazing to see the growth of the podcast, the change of the name, which we can talk about on another show, because that's something that's easy to do when you control everything that you do. You can pivot like that. So thank you so much for trusting us. Thank you for working with us. And we're just really excited to see everything that comes from your podcast.
I have to say, as a closing point, that being able to do it in the way I do it, you know, has actually rubbed off on other people. And I've got a friend who came to me with a question like, hey, I've got a book publishing question. And I'm like, okay. And she told me her problem. I'm like, that's not a book, that's a podcast first. And I'm speaking to her in half an hour on her new podcast. Like, you know, some people just go and run with it because you show them how to do it. I've given a Loom video of all my little secrets and tips and tricks. And some people just go for it and do a really good job. So yeah, it's so nice that it sort of comes as a sort of chain reaction, that from you to us to other people, because sharing this information, it's just beautifully accessible. And I think that's, you know, after 10 years of publishing, I'm rethinking like how I can get stuff out there. And yeah, with your help, it's been, you know, invaluable. So thank you.
You are very welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Smarter Podcasting. Remember, if you want to be like Radim and work with 7 Million Bikes Podcast, go to the show notes or just email me, neil@7millionbikes.com, or go to www.7millionbikes.com. You can find the button there. As we talked about all these tools, that is linked to my Calendly. It will go straight into my calendar. You can book a call with me. We can have a discovery call for 15 minutes to talk about how we can work together, or you can book a consultation with me and I can share all those tips and tricks with you. So thank you so much. Go to www.7millionbikes.com. Radim, thank you so much for joining me on Smarter Podcasting.
Thank you.
Cheers. I wanted to share with you about one of my favorite affiliate partners, and that is Fiverr. I've been using Fiverr for years for everything from ordering YouTube thumbnails to keyword research, writing podcast articles, even to Canva designs and thumbnails and more. So whether you're a budding entrepreneur, a podcaster, or anyone in between, Fiverr has got you covered. It really is the go-to platform if you want to find freelancers offering a massive range of services to help you on any project. Maybe you need a stunning new logo or just a short animation. Whatever you need, you can find it on Fiverr. What I love the most is how easy Fiverr makes it to connect with talented freelancers from around the world, all at prices that will fit whatever your budget is. Plus, with Fiverr's secure payment system, you can trust that your transactions are safe and secure. No dodgy people you meet on Facebook groups that disappear with your money and never give you what you want. What, that's only happened to me? As an affiliate partner, I will get a small commission if you use the link and at no extra cost to you. As an affiliate partner, I will get a small commission if you click my link and you buy something, all at no extra cost to you. And best of all, you will be directly supporting the making of this podcast that you're listening to for free, but it is not free to make. So why we head over to somewhere that you've probably never been before. It's called the show notes. So whatever app you're listening in, if it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anything at all, head to the show notes, click on my special link, and then you can browse thousands of gigs ready to help you with your next project.